Okay, this is a hollow depth indicator. I'm going to replace the tip which is worn on it, but for that I want to just show what this is for. You go through, you've got a blade, I've got a left edge and a right edge, and I want to measure to see if I've got equal edges. So you move the brass slide, which is a dovetail, to the left, and you move it to the right. I'm going to move it in the center, get the lowest reading, and I'm going to attempt to zero this, even though I can't be exactly in line with the camera. It looks pretty much to be zero right there. And then if I go to the left edge is about 3/1000ths of an inch high, and the right edge is about 3/1000ths, maybe about 2.8, so it's almost correct. So I'm measuring the height edge from the depth of the valley, which is the hollow. You go in the center, you center the height HDI, measure the left edge of the blade, you traverse over and measure the right edge of the blade. So when you use this thing for just seeing if you're sharpening correct, all you do is you center this on 0, and then you go to the left, go to the right, you want the same number. If you want to measure the radius of hollow, what you do, you set this on 0, and then you look at your edges. They're about 3/1000ths of an inch. So you use the thickness of the blade, use a caliper, and you measure the thickness of the blade. This is about 115, say 100 the hollow is. Now if you just want to look at a roll of tape here, this indicator, the edge of the blade is like this. I've got it the wrong way. Let's go ahead, and it's actually this way. The indicator's at the bottom of the hollow, and he goes up and measures the top. Then he goes down to the hollow, and you go back up to this other edge. You want both edges to be equal. Let me go ahead and replace the tip of the depth of hollow indicator. It's a Mitutoyo, and the tip is worn after being used for many years. I got this used probably about 15 years ago or more, and the tip has become worn. There's a little line on here, and it was like that when I first got it. And so this tip gets depressed, and you go ahead and traverse it back and forth to measure one edge of a skate blade and the other edge of a skate blade. You could put it in the center to measure the depth of the valley, and you can also check for uneven edges. But that's the plunger on the end of an indicator, and it's got a little line through it. I don't know if somebody slid a blade across it or that's just from wear. Okay, these hollow depth indicators were originally made by Edge Specialties and Company in Minnesota, and then they were sold a few years ago, I think, to Wissota because the owners retired, Jan and Brad. And then the way this is used is you clamp a blade in here. It's got a gap. And then this brass piece will traverse back and forth like this. And so if you go through here and set this up to where you move this back and forth and look for the minimum, I'll set that on 0, and I can go up here, and this goes up to about roughly 3, goes to the minimum, goes back up to 3. So that's got the center of the hollow is 0, and I've purposely rotated the scale around, and then I've moved this up to it reads 3. And what this is doing is the indicator is going from one edge of the blade back to another is what it's doing. And on this particular one, the tip is a little bit screwed up, so I've got a brand new tip here like this little piece, and I got this from, it's called an HDI contact point. I bought this a couple years ago. And Wissota had it in a little bag attached to the invoice. That's why it didn't get lost in the box. So I thank them for that. But this unit here I've had for probably, I want to say 15 years at least. Bought it used. Okay, the way that you take this apart to replace the tip is this is a 5/64 Allen wrench. You put it in the side and you take out the gauge. And in my particular one it says HDI, and I think the newer one says HDI on it. And then here's the tip. It's got a 448 piece on it. You just unscrew that, put a new tip on. Yeah, butterfingers here. Just gonna snug it tight. I guess I could put some Loctite on there, but I'd probably be better just put a dab of RTV or something on the side so it doesn't get locked. Each one of these from here, 0 to 5 is 5/1000ths of an inch. Thickness of sheet of paper is about 2.5. Now, on here, when you put this in, this goes in here like this, and I believe they have it so where it's not doing a whole full rev, so to keep the pressure down. So I'm going to put this in here like this, make sure I'm framed up sort of, and I'm going to go through here and just push this just a little bit and tighten it up. Probably need to call them up and ask them. It doesn't have to be technically vertically. Now you slide this back and forth. And let me just see how well I've got that framed up. That looks sort of okay. So this is a dovetail here in brass. So you slide it in the middle. Let me just see if I can get that framed up a little bit better. Rotate it around some. So I'm on one edge of the blade over here. Slide the brass over, you're on the other part. So if you slide this to the center, that's about a 0. There's 3 mils this way, about 3 that way. If I take those readings and I go look at this table that's from Wissota here, that's their chart. Okay. These blades are about 100 and say 18/1000ths, which is kind of between these two, closest to 115. So I've got in the green over there, this is called the hollow depth. Got about 3/1000ths of an inch. 115 is about a 1/2 inch radius of hollow. So it's actually measuring the depth of the hollow, the lowest point. And from that, math-wise, if you know the thickness of the blade, you can figure out the radius of hollow. So most of the time people just use these things to measure if there's unequal edges. But this is called a HDI, means a hollow depth indicator. So the hollow is the low point. So if the blade does this, Let me see if we can focus. Are we focused? Sort of focused. The indicator, the radius of curvature of this little indicator is way more curved that comes in here. So it's going to touch anywhere along here. This here, if I just eyeball it, probably has a radius of curvature almost of, I don't know, maybe 3/8 or 5/16 or something. So it's always going to go ahead and touch anywhere on here. So measuring this height, this is 0, and I'm getting these dimensions here. This is 3/1000ths of an inch, and over here is 3/1000ths of an inch. So the hollow indicator lets you to go see whether you have equal edges, which means the height of this from the 0 and the height of this from 0 are equal. That's what you normally use it for. It also is giving this height of 3/1000ths, which on this chart here you can go through, and if you know the thickness of the blade and 3/1000ths, you got roughly about a 1/2 inch radius of hollow. I think those blades I did about 1/2 inch to 5/8. A lot of times you measure the radius of hollow with a metal gauge. So you see sometimes people will use a set of these. These are actually from Pro Sharp from a long time ago. But this is 1.5 inches in diameter, width of a 2x4. So this has got a 3/4 inch radius of hollow, and you put this up and you eyeball that to see if you can see how it matches. And so this one particular here has got, there's a 3/8. You eyeball this back and forth to see how it matches up. So normally they have one of these on another all-on-one piece of metal. Incredible Edger has one like that. This particular piece here is an old school one to measure the thickness of the blade, and this one's from Sweden, and you read off the thickness of the blade. This one was particular in metric. So I went through and changed the indicator on here for the traveling point. And you can see I got a little bit cocked over because I was just trying to do this for the video real quick, kind of show how to remove it. I actually got these points a couple years ago, but I never did replace it. The kind of grew legs, couldn't find it. But this little point on here had a little bit of a whoop-de-doo on here. So when you watch the dial, it would go up and have kind of a hesitation because it grabbed on here. So I don't know if somebody had run this back and forth or whatever, but it was perfectly just about in line with this piece. And I can go ahead and rotate this over some. And this edge indicator here, again, most of the time people use it to see if you've got equal edges or not. So you look for the minimum, rotate that to the minimum, and then you've got, that's the edge this way, and that's the edge this way. And that's what I was doing here, showing the side view of that. So if your unit is not aligned right, one of these might read 4 mils here and 2 over here, or 4 and 3.5. These tips are only, I want to say they were like $6 or $7 a few years ago. I think I got them 3 or 4 years ago. It's a bunch of different types. This particular one, this was an English thread, 4/48. Some of them are metric, but I decided just to get them from Wissota because I had something else I was ordering from. These things last a long time. The dial on one of these used, I think a new old stock one on eBay is about $80, and then I think brand new they're about $200 just for this dial. you can replace the point, the Fowler piece. And that's what the purpose of this video is, because I always had this. I had a little whoop-de-doo when I went ahead and traversed this back and forth. And if you look at this, you can see, if you can see me moving that. So what that's doing is that tip exaggerated is touching here, and it drops down in the valley, and it goes up here on the top. And that's what the dial here indicator's reading.